Jujutsu Kaisen is one of the cruelest shows that I have ever seen. Shonen for years has been sanitized beyond contempt, so it's not surprising that something as raw and vicious as JJK has blown up. But does it really deserve that title? Does it really deserve to be part of the new big three? Well, to answer that question, I've decided to rank every episode, starting with season 1. Enjoy. Ryomen Sukuna is a great pilot, focused on one thing: the cruelty of its world. The JJK verse is riddled with monster-like beings called curses that feed off negative emotions. They are a very direct metaphor for things like misery and death. But rather than explaining them and the magic system, it's way more focused on Yuji Itadori, our main character. Yuji is in many ways a very average main character. He's the go-lucky, save everyone shining hope trope. They even do the whole, oh no, one of my parents is dead, I gotta respect their last wishes, which just so happens to be to save others. Yuji is a very dynamic character, so for now, he's fun. They give him a really strong emotional backbone. He does a good job of being noble without being overbearing. As for the plot, Yuji discovers a curse-attracting cursed finger. After having a misunderstanding with this pincushion of a human being called Megami, he eats it, inheriting a demon. Megami and the cursed spirit, who is called Ryomen Sukuna, by the way. Wink wink, nudge nudge. This episode has a very loose plot. It's really just Yuji being introduced to all these magical elements. But I really don't think that's a bad thing. If I had to choose a word to describe this episode, I would say atmospheric. A main character looking into a magical world is a really redundant concept. But just the fact that this world can sometimes feel like hell makes it a really intriguing and good pilot. But let's get down to actually seeing that cruelty. This episode, top of the list. Next. For Myself does a pretty good job of expanding the world from last episode, primarily through a proper introduction to Ryomen Sukuna. So, Sukuna is kinda like Kurama from Naruto if he never became a good guy, and personally, I love him as a villain. Not like that. His first line in the series is, "Where are the women and children?" And I'm sorry, that's just really funny. In addition, there's also another popular character, Satoru Gojo. Gojo is the strongest Jujutsu sorcerer. He's also just really fun to have on screen. He's likable, he's funny, he's mysterious. You also just get the tiniest bit of insight into Megami's character, which is just kind of edgy, honestly. I also like his dogs, because his whole technique is just summoning creatures. Gojo's introduction is great. After Yuji unceremoniously eats Sukuna's finger, and after Yuji learns how to turn him on and off like a Wi-Fi router, Sukuna and Gojo have their first fight. Though fight is a bit generous, he knocks his teeth in. It's a good scene, showing us just how powerful Gojo is. But the real meat of this episode is Yuji's decision with his life. So Yuji is given a choice. Either 1, he can die, or 2, he can collect all of Sukuna's 20 fingers, saving a lot of people, and then die. I was worried they were gonna do the cliche where he does it just because his grandpa told him to, but no, my expectations were pleasantly subverted. It's noted this is something only he can do, and that is why he does it. It's a neat little chunk of character growth there. That's the good part of the episode. The rest of it is Yuji moving into his new Jujutsu sorcery high school. It's pretty charming. I like the banter between Gojo, Yuji, and Megami. It's just a really aggressive tonal shift, and I don't think it fits the episode. And for that reason, I just don't think it's as good as last episode. That one was just way better tonally. Under the last, let's see if it gets better with... Girl of Steel is about one thing, and one thing only. My new favorite character and third student, Nobara Kugisaki. Nobara has excellent writing. She has the first truly well-made backstory about her motivation for going to the Jujutsu high school. TLDR, she lived in the countryside, she had a friend who was from the city, and they all forced her out. It's a good motivation, and it does a very good job of setting up her character as somebody with a very aggressive core. And even just aside from all the technical stuff, her being such a headstrong character, you know, wearing everything on her sleeve, makes her a really compelling character to watch. Their introductory scene, the one where Megami, Yuji, and Nobara meet for the first time, is hard carried by her banter. That and her internal monologue, they're just really funny. That's not to mention her curse technique style, which is probably my favorite out of the main 3. Yuji, he punches things. Megami, he summons things. Nobara has a straw doll technique, which means she can either attack remotely with effigies or hit somebody with nails. If I did have a complaint about the episode, I would say that the action is pretty minimal. It really does feel like a Nobara-centric episode. But by far my favorite is the cliffhanger on this episode. It is a mission report that says one of the 3 first years has died. I just really appreciate the tonal whiplash of something being so wholesome and so cruel at the same time. The only fault I can give this episode, because I do love Nobara, is that the plot is extremely weak. But even still, I'll put it above the last. Next. Curse Who Must Die is great. It is the perfect encapsulation of what JJK is. Cruel, and captivating. Our main three guys go to an abandoned detention center where they encounter a special grade cursed spirit, also known as the most powerful type of cursed spirit. He's very much the best non-Sukuna villain so far. His design and his sheer power are so physically overwhelming that it raises the stakes immensely, and that's paired with the fact that we know one of them will die. The result is classic JJK razor sharp tension. I get to comment very much on the action of the show, but no, here it is excellent. Yuji's fucking hands get blown off. It is entirely sold on how well it's animated. It is phenomenal. It does a really good job of building this rising dread. By the midpoint of the episode, Megami and Nobara have just barely escaped, and Yuji has basically sacrificed himself. Then, mid-episode, twist of the century, the entire episode shatters as Sukuna bulldozes everything. When he switches with Yuji, he almost automatically and instinctively heals his hand. That special grade, the one who nearly killed everybody, is torn to shreds. And that beautiful, beautiful characterization of Yuji, where he sacrifices himself and accepts his death, is literally spit on by Sukuna. Sukuna also does wonders for the Jujutsu High School magic system. He does something core to the show, domain expansion. It's a really complicated thing, and I'll explain it when Gojo does in a few episodes, but just know, for now, it is amazing. The little chunk of his malevolent shrine is so peak. The entire thing, you were just recovering from all of that, and then the hook. God, I love the hook. Sukuna realizes Yuji can't switch back, and just look at the demonic glee on his face. This guy is an irredeemable monster, and I love every second of it. This episode is as much a JJK episode as you can possibly get. It's dark, it's cruel, and it is so electric. Truly Jujutsu Kaisen's first banger episode. Top of the list. Easily. Part 2 starts off really strong, with Sukuna having a long but meaningful fight with Megami. It gives you some good insight into Megami's full arsenal of little guys he can summon, including a hinted final form. Foreshadowing aside, seeing all of his summons be eviscerated and Sukuna ripping his heart out so that if Yuji transfers back, he'll die is the definite highlight. It's also just a very well choreographed fight. It's really interesting to look at visually, and I absolutely love seeing how the fight starts and ends with Yuji knowing he's gonna die. Knowing what I know, and what I know is that this is not the ending, I would be pretty justified in calling this a cheap twist. Especially because the scene afterward is an extended monologue of everybody being very sad. But also, knowing what I now know, I'm happy this is just a fake out death, not a real one. After that, there's not very much in the episode. We meet the second years of the Jujutsu High School, and one of them is a panda. That's pretty funny. And they also set up this curse association. It's a bunch of real smart curses who want to switch positions with humans. And to do so, they must do two things. Stop Gojo, because he's so strong, and get Sukuna/Yuji on your side. That's more season 2 stuff, but whatever. The episode really is carried by the Megami Sukuna fight. The rest is, it's okay. Under the last, let's see if Yuji comes back in. The rain has to be good. Why? Yuji's back. Yippee! He made a binding vow with Sukuna, where in exchange for saving his life, he would 1. Be allowed to at any point swap out for 1 minute without the ability to harm anybody, and 2. That Yuji would forget about it. It's clearly foreshadowing something. Wonder why? For now, let's just appreciate having Yuji back, alright? This episode is really just your training up the basics episode. Yuji has just been kicking people without any curse technique, so he and Gojo have a little training sequence where he has to watch a bunch of movies. It's pretty fun. I like the callback to the dolls that the principal made in episode 2. Another part is Megami and Nobara, who interact with the second years for a while. There's Inamaki, this Kenkaneki looking motherfucker. He has a really interesting cursed ability in my opinion, the most interesting of all of the second years. Whatever he says becomes the curse technique. I suppose we'll get into him more in his very few fights, but for now, he is extremely underutilized. Panda's here too, just being a panda. Awesome. And there's Maki, who, similar to Yuji, can't use curse techniques, and is all hands. I like her. It's definitely a lot more of a down-the-low episode. You know, it's just a chill episode. Nothing really that important happens. There is, as always, a really good hook. Gojo fights Jogo, who is this Mount Fuji-looking curse. He's supposed to be the manifestation of volcanoes. He's also one of the people that wants to switch the positions of humans and curses. He's okay. I really like his design, even though his black teeth kind of freak me out. There's also this other guy who doesn't really do anything until season 2. Let's call him Monkey Man. The elders of the human society think that Yuji is dead. They wanted him dead because, you know, he is a literal ticking time bomb. But I still like how they add Monkey Man as an even bigger threat. I mean, he wants to kill every single human. Anyway, back to the actual episode. This episode as a whole, fine. But for JJK, fine just doesn't cut it. The plot is a bit too loose. Nothing that important happens. The hook at the end is literally 30 seconds. So for that, and a mediocre plot, bottom of the list. On to Side note, it's funny how this is my second time reviewing an episode titled Assault. Anyway, the continuation with the Gojo-Jogo fight is amazing. As fights go, it's not necessarily supposed to be as tense. It doesn't have that same emotional raw appeal that 4 does. I mean, the underlying theme here is that Jogo realizes his only chance is to somehow get Sukuna alive again. So yeah, Gojo absolutely dog walks him. Even still, some of the action is very strong, and I like how it sheds light on what Gojo even is. Gojo has this unbelievably overpowered ability called Infinity, and it means he can make the distance between you and him infinity. This is completely insane, and the solution is my favorite part of the JJK magic system. Domains. Domains are considered the ultimate jujutsu technique, which is what Sukuna did that one time. They're themed little spheres that physically appear and make it so that you never miss. On a technical level, I can really appreciate this as an addition to the magic system, but because I really love Jogo, and especially Gojo's domains. The best moment in the entire episode is when Gojo takes his bandana off and releases his own domain, which, get this, stun locks the opponent by giving them infinity. It's just such a direct way of saying, this is how strong Gojo really is. It is just straight up awesome. Jogo does manage to narrowly escape with the help of his plant boyfriend, whose name I refuse to learn. We also get a hint of our next truly banger main villain, Mahito. I'll leave my opinion on him a mystery, but boy, he is a handful. This episode isn't nearly as emotional or compact as 4 is, and in my opinion, good, but it's still really great. It has an all-around good characterization, great villain, and amazing fight scenes, so even still, second isn't bad. On to Boredom is another decent episode. Here, we get to meet the students of a new Jujutsu high school, Mai and Todo. Mai is barely worth mentioning. He doesn't really do anything except be Maki's twin. Also just be a bitch to Nobara. Nobara, my goat. I honestly really hate Mai. So what they try to do with her character is set up that she and Maki are gonna fight. It's gonna take like 10 episodes to resonate, but whatever. That's what all the basic training for them was, by the way. I just forgot to mention it because I'm stupid. Anyway, Todo is way better. And this guy is fucking strong. His base form, no curse technique, is as strong as Yuji. He also has this really interesting habit of asking people their type. This is his, allegedly.
Tall one with a big gorgeous ass!
Which, I mean, he's not wrong. He's also one of those people who's obsessed with pop idols, which is a fun mix. And while this is happening, he's also beating up Megami because he has a boring type. Hilarious. There's also some less unimportant subplots, like Gojo meeting this old head principal guy. He's one of the elders that wants to kill Yuji, by the way. He's kind of a bitch. There's also this really nice bonding moment between Maki and Nobara. Why do they bond, you might ask? Because they both hate Mai. And honestly, it's really sweet. I appreciate it as a more slow, character-driven episode, but by JJK standards, it's just decent. Nothing that impactful really happens. Middle of the list, under the pilot. Next. We finally get a proper look at the new villain, Mahito. This episode is mainly a detective story between Yuji and this other sorcerer guy called Nanami. I like Nanami here. He's the classic stoic, silent type. His technique isn't the most interesting in my opinion. It's just cutting off 70-30 to make a critical point. And even though he is kind of a basic character archetype, they do try to add an interesting bit of depth to him. He has this whole shtick where the only thing he does is want to get out of work. And the bond that he forms with Yuji is sweet enough. But that's not the best part. The best part is Mahito. He is an excellent villain. Mahito is a curse born from the fear of other humans. And what this means is that he's able to contort the human form. For example, in the middle of the investigation, there's this okay fight scene between Yuji, Nanami, and 2 monsters. It's revealed at the end of the fight that these are humans. Mahito did this to them. It's just something so like primally evil that you can't help but feel it. The main problem with this episode as a whole is that it has to set up the arc. This other character called Junpei who bonds with Mahito because everybody bullies him. Now he's apathetic in the same way that Mahito doesn't really give a shit about anybody. Because they have to divide their time in between introducing Mahito, introducing Nanami, having the fight scene, and introducing Junpei, it's definitely not a standout. Even then, the Yuji-Nanami dynamic is strong enough to pull this episode up. And I am excited to see where Mahito and Junpei go. So, above the last. Next. Nanami tracks down Mahito, and Yuji meets Junpei. The Nanami-Mahito fight is definitely the better half. Mahito's transfigured humans and soul-altering fight style is just really fun to see clash with Nanami's own. They also just have really good dialogue to make us understand his powers and his sheer apathy. The Junpei stuff isn't quite as solid. The majority of his last episode was about his own backstory, so there's a little tonal whiplash between that episode and him meeting Yuji, which is this upbeat, fun adventure. That being said, I did like the setup to that, which was just Yuji and Ajichi, who was this assistant to Nanami, Nanami having a fun little adventure. The episode's really between a rock and a hard place. Nanami Mahito fight is excellent. The issue is that just as it's getting good, it cuts off. Though, to be fair, the cutoff is really good. Basically, it hits 5 o'clock, so Nanami clocks out, and that gives him overtime cursed energy, because he just cares a lot about work. It's a really good moment for his character. And while the Junpei stuff is intriguing, it's done infinitely better in future episodes. In all, not bad. But just a teaser of what Mahito can really do above the pilot. Narrow-Minded is a very specialized character study into Junpei. It does have some other elements, like the Mahito-Nanami fight does conclude, even though it's about a 2-minute romp. Still, it's an okay progression. It really does set up good tension for their rematch. But as a whole, the episode is almost exclusively a dive into Junpei's character. And I really do love the way it does this. As I mentioned earlier, Junpei was being attracted to Mahito's ideals, basically apathy, and killing based on the simple premise that you want to kill, which is then aggressively contrasted with Yuji as they develop their wholesome little friendship. And aside from that just being nice, Junpei especially has been shat on for like 3 episodes. There's this ideological tug of war between both Mahito and Yuji over Junpei. But obviously this show isn't known for being nice. All the progress that Yuji was making swiftly reversed. Junpei's mom, the only facet of his emotional support, dies. I really like this. You know, conceptually, I don't like dead moms. But it doesn't have that fake out that episode 5 had. And the tragedy is only greater increased when you realize that Mahito did this. This is the point where you realize that Mahito is pure evil. It's not one of those, this villain has a soft spot for one character. No, he is just manipulating Junpei, and it is tragic. And it makes this episode so hard to watch. Not in terms of quality, but watching Junpei's downward spiral into trusting Mahito and going into his old school to kill all his bullies is brilliantly done. But at the same time, it just makes you feel like shit. And all of those miserable emotions are hooked on Yuji. I'll talk about Junpei's curse techniques next episode, but just know that the detail of all of this negative emotion making him so much stronger so quickly is chef's kiss. It's not a very action-y episode, but it is a solid character arc with a ton of that sincere JJK cruelty. And my bronze pick. Next. God, I genuinely love To You Someday. At the start, Junpei and Yuji have this absolutely tragic fight scene. It's well choreographed, well paced. I really like Junpei's little Shinigami. It's this little jellyfish. I mean, that's just such a perfect metaphor. You know, just as Yuji and Junpei are gonna be normal again, just as they're imagining a future of themselves both at Jujutsu High, Mahito permanently idol transfigures him into a mindless monster. This is utterly devastating, a true fuck you to both Yuji and the audience. We have to watch such a tragic, complex character mangled. It is awful, but I still love it. It sets up one of the best shots in the entire show. See, the entire point of all this is that Mahito is trying to force Sukuna onto their side, and the way he's doing this is by making Yuji sign into a pact with Sukuna. But what both Mahito and Yuji don't realize is that Sukuna is truly a curse. He just utterly refuses, and in that moment, Yuji realizes the evilness of curses. We see this as they are both maniacally laughing at him. It is an excellent shot. And even though that's probably the best singular part of the episode, the ensuing fight scene between both Yuji and Mahito, where Mahito realizes that he can feel his own soul so he can't be transformed, is also just excellent. It has the same appeal as the Nanami Mahito fight, but this time it has an even stronger emotional core. And at the end, there's a whole setup on how Nanami saves him, and there's going to be a 2-man fight the next episode, but that's not important right now. I just want to focus on how perfect this episode is so far. The fights are great. The emotional tension is phenomenal. And that patented JJK cruel edge that makes everything feel so dangerous and real is the best it's ever been. Top of the list. Easily. I would be shocked to see a better one anytime soon. For what it's worth, tomorrow is also really good. The Mahito fight with Yuji and Nanami is easily the best one so far. Mahito just has such an interesting fighting style, and seeing Nanami and Yuji team up attacks is just fun to watch. It also ends in a really interesting way. Basically, after fighting around for a while, Mahito gets to do his own domain, self-embodiment of perfection. His domain is also extremely overpowered. If you remember, domains always hit in their attacks. If Mahito ever touches your soul, he can basically do anything he wants with you. The only reason Nanami is able to live is because when Yuji enters in, Mahito accidentally touches Sukuna's soul. He gets so offended that he just I would say it's a bit of a Deus Ex Machina, but I mean, that's just funny too. Sukuna as a whole has a very fun presence throughout these episodes. Like, he could have very easily just lied to Yuji and twisted his arm into getting full control of his body, but he doesn't. Sukuna is just a prick in these episodes, and I love it. They do also make an effort to not make it just pure fight stuff. There's this pretty sweet interlude about Nanami's backstory, which I enjoyed. There's a few cute scenes with him interacting with this bakery girl, and he's like, oh, I gotta go save people now. In my opinion, it makes more sense to use the other part of his backstory, but whatever. And after the fight ends with Mahito going down a drain and escaping, there's some nice post-fight scenes that I also enjoy, with Yuji reuniting with Gojo. In terms of where this episode would rank, one is clearly more emotional, while this one is a lot more fight-heavy, and personally, I just don't think I can let the Junpei moment slide down just yet. But second place ain't bad. Hope the ball keeps rolling with... Group Battle Zero is all about Yuji finally getting back with the Tokyo students, aka Megami and Nobara, to fight in the exchange event set up in the Todo Mai episode. The first thing you notice about this episode is how slow it is. That's not necessarily a bad thing though. The last few episodes were so action-packed that it's nice to take a break and re-gear for the next threat, which just so happens to be all of the Kyoto students, aka the Mai Todo group, being ordered by the old head that Gojo met that one time to kill Yuji. The episode also just has the benefit of being pretty fun. A lot of the Tokyo students have these fun little quips, and it really does have the dual purpose of also healing Yuji emotionally, who has not been taking the Junpei stuff very well. They intentionally added a lot to this one since it has to set up the new students, the teachers, and how the curses have moved on to a new plan to steal Sukuna's fingers. And while it is useful, plot-wise, it really bogs the whole thing down. The only notably interesting Kyoto student is Todo, and that's just because he's off the wall. The rest do jack shit. The other students, despite being mentioned earlier like Miwa or Mai, are just either boring or not interesting. They do definitely get better, but there are some that really never get fleshed out. I really do want to like this episode. It has such a nice focus on comedy, and the renewal for Yuji is great, but the plot is just not there. Oh well, I guess we'll have to see how the exchange event idea continues. Under Girl of Steel. Next. Group Battle Part 1 successfully starts the exchange event, which is a group hunt to catch a curse. But of course, nobody does that, and they immediately start fighting, setting up some future 1v1s like Miwa and Maki, but most notably, Todo and Yuji. Now, Todo and Yuji have a very good fight, very fist-to-fist Baki style, but what really elevates it is just Todo. Todo asks Yuji his type, and he says,
I like a tall woman with a nice big ass.
And this agreement leads to them becoming instant BFFs. They have this really goddamn funny bit in the middle where Todo has like a 5-minute fantasy sequence where he's like, oh, Yuji is my best friend since I was like 4, and he confesses to his idol girlfriend thing. It is completely out of left field. I don't know what was going on, but it was pretty funny. It does tone down a little bit and get a bit more serious by the end. Todo explains to Yuji a flaw in his curse technique, and it explains a lot of how they actually kind of become friends. Overall, not that much really happens. It's slow, it's kind of lopsided, but unlike the previous, I can at least justify liking it because the plot actually has a backbone. It's just a really fun episode, and do you really need anything else? Even if Todo's back must definitely hurt from carrying the entire thing. Middle of the list. Next. Part 2 is focused on a fight between two unlikely characters, Panda and Mechamaru. They're both pretty underutilized characters. The only thing I knew about Panda was, well, that he was a panda. Listen, I wasn't thinking very hard, but he has a shockingly complex backstory. Basically, he's a cursed corpse, which is like a living dead doll with cursed energy inside of it. He's one of the things created by the principal guy in episode 2, and he has the ability to switch between 3 modes, Panda, Gorilla, and another one they don't really do anything with. This is an extremely interesting idea for a character, and it really adds a lot to him, even if, personally, I think some of that didn't translate to his actual personality. Like, you would expect something made out of pure cursed energy to be somewhat interesting personality-wise, but like, he's just a 6.5-foot panda. Venomous potential in my opinion, but whatever. Mechamaru, on the other hand, is full of personality. He does a very crucial job of giving some of the non-Todo Kyoto students a bit of life. He has a heavenly restriction, a criminally underutilized concept, where in exchange for a very weak physical body, he has an extremely powerful mechanical body. Also, side note, heavenly restrictions are given to you at birth. I think it's also the reason why Maki can't use cursed energy. Considering the unfortunately subhuman way that these two characters view each other and themselves, it creates an extremely strong emotional backbone for their fight. And when Panda eventually beats him at the end, they have a really sweet moment where they remark how they both actively want to be Jujutsu sorcerers, even though it's been basically forced onto them. It's just a really solid standalone episode. I'm shocked I enjoyed it as much as I have. But hey, I'm not complaining. 5th place overall. Next. Group Battle Part 3 is an odd take on a character-focused episode. This time, Maki. It does so through 3 main battles. Miwa vs. Maki, where it's vaguely mentioned how much she's beating the shit out of Miwa. Though that's not exactly high praise, Miwa is arguably the weakest out of any of the students. Entire technique is making a small domain that was dodged by base Yuji barely paying attention. So her getting absolutely dog-walked is not exactly a surprise. Then there's Nobara versus this really annoying witch girl. This one is meant as an avenue of giving Mai's character sympathy, but it's honestly Nobara who steals the show. She has this excellent moment in the fight of realizing her own self-identity, and it is so good. It is amazing. And then the natural conclusion to what was set up in the previous episode, Maki versus Mai. And even though there was clearly something wrong between the two of them, this episode sets that bridge on fire. Basically, they come from one of the big 3 cursed families, including the one that Megami is part of, the Zenin. And the Zenin are all a bunch of sexist, superficial assholes. A theme that the show is not done with. Wink wink. And in doing so, does something I previously considered impossible. Make me sympathize for Mai. In fairness, I still don't like her, but she went from being a very flat to actually being very well rounded and written as a character. You can sympathize for her and she becomes understandable, if not likable. That's not to speak of the volumes that it does for Maki as a character. Her backstory shows why she's so determined to prove herself, why she doesn't fully hate Mai. If there's any compliment I can give JJK is that it does excellent female writing. Mostly. The last thing I'll mention is how the actual fights look. Since the Miwa and Mai ones are functional dog walks by Maki, it really only leaves us with the Nobara versus the Witch Lady fight. Even still, I don't think this is inherently a negative. Maki being able to beat such opponents so easily is the point of the narrative, so it makes sense. The only possible downside I can think of is how it really doesn't tie into the main plot, but that's semantics. Above the last. Next. Sage is an episode that very violently interrupts the previous arc, and it does so by unleashing an even greater foe, that being that special grade tree spirit that rescued Jogo in episode 7. The prelude to it is interesting in its own right. It's a fight between Megami and this other guy who has a pretty tragic backstory and can bend blood. Yes, like the Avatar character. He's really not a bad character, but there's something just so forgettable about him. Like, I watched this episode 15 minutes ago, and I cannot tell you his fucking name. I googled it. His name is apparently Noritoshi. Genuinely a lot of missed potential, but whatever. Fight, overall, pretty decent, but when the tree guy attacks, everything changes. Also, funnily enough, the spirits place a barrier that only doesn't let Gojo in. Like, surely there was some way to make that a bit more seamless. Having the tree guy as the main villain really benefits this episode, and it does make it very solid overall. But compared to the real bangers, it is kind of just setting up another fight against the tree guy. So as a result, it does kind of feel like Megami the blood-bending guy and Inamaki are just running away for no reason. Still though, solid. Under the last. Black Flash starts off with Maki, the braids guy whose name I forgot again, and Megami all getting dog-walked by the tree guy, aka Hanami. The part's fairly short, so I won't go into too much detail, but it is cool to see Megami and Maki tag team. Even if, again, it is entirely just to show how much of a threat this guy is. This leads to the best 2-man dynamic fighting duo so far, Todo and Yuji, who have, because they're both idiots, instantly bonded and become best friends. Honestly, not shocked. That being said, they really do work well off each other, both fighting and banter-wise, and it carries the slightly weaker central motivation for the fight. Directly comparing it to the Mahito fight, since these episodes are clearly good enough to chance those ones, this one has a way better flow with its fight scheme. Like in the Mahito fight, Yuji is just sort of punching him repeatedly, while here, Yuji gets to learn this really new cool technique called Black Flash. From what I understand, it's a really hard QuickTime event, and it looks sick as so that's definitely an improvement, but on the other hand, Hanami is just inherently a weaker villain. He is a fraction as compelling, and that interesting motivation with Yuji is just no longer there. Still, in general, I'm willing to overlook that, given he's still a pretty good villain, and his plant-based techniques are on par, if not better than Mahito's. Visually speaking, it's just a very solid fight, and it gets even better on the reveal, you know JJK and its hooks, that Todo has been holding back this entire time. And for those reasons, I think it beats out the pure Mahito fight episode, but I think that the Junpei's episode core is too strong to beat out just yet. But still, silver spot. What's next? A fucking banger, that's what. Non-standard is split into 3 main things. A continuation of the Todo Yuji Hanami fight, a few other fights that don't really matter, and Gojo using his first Hollow Purple. I'll start with the Yuji Todo stuff since it easily makes up the majority of the runtime. As a baseline, it is excellent. The fight last episode was a clear indication that this dynamic worked wonderfully, but here they escalated even further, both by Yuji having a lot more of those critical hit black flashes and Todo being an absolute genius. I mean, not only does this guy have 530,000 IQ points, he has the funniest technique name ever, Boogie Woogie. I love how simple it is. It literally just switches any two objects' place. And it is greatly helped by the fact that both Yuji and Todo, being physical fighters, are close range. Even aside from all that escalation stuff, it is just nice to see both of them bond so well that they can beat up a special grade. Yuji died to one of those things 3 months ago. That is crazy progress. That's not to mention that the anti-Gojo border finally gets put down. It finally lets Gojo use his most famous technique, Hollow Purple. It does kind of end a fight that probably would have been more satisfactory if Todo and Yuji had done it, but then again, I really don't care. Hollow Purple is just so awesome. Overall, this episode is just well-rounded and great. Everything in it just works. The characters, the fights, the moments. It's not as emotional as the Junpei episode, but that one is just way too quaint to where I just have to put this one at the top of the list. Next. I'm gonna say this in the nicest way I can. Jujutsu Kaisen is a really good episode for a filler arc. Quite simply, nothing happens. Whoop-de-doo. I guess, plot twist, Hanami's still alive, and they successfully stole the fingers, which is like the entire point. But really, all that is in one 2-minute montage. The rest of it is about every character randomly playing a baseball game. I'm gonna put aside that I find baseball fucking boring. Nothing happens. The stakes aren't raised, no character progresses. There is one moment with the old principal guy that he's like, huh, maybe I shouldn't kill a child. But that also has nothing to do with what's going on. He literally says this as Yuji hits a pitch fly. Like, what is the connection? That being said, there are some positives to this episode, even though, again, kind of nothing. Okay, enough complaining. This episode is really funny. Like, genuinely funny. Arguably the funniest episode. But my problem is that they're just a bunch of character gags. They don't even try to do anything with the baseball game, which, like, I guess I prefer because I don't like the baseball game, but, like, at least try to make it related, you know? I know I sound annoyed, but I really don't care. This episode's not bad. Decent, even. But for Jujutsu Kaisen, this level of a show, bottom of the list. Let's see if they pick up the pace. The Origin of Blind Obedience does a solid job of starting this new mini-arc. How good that mini-arc is, I beg to differ. TLDR, Yuji, Megumi, and Nobara investigate a cursed case of people who bungee jumped off a bridge, got cursed, and died or will die. Like Megumi's new sister, Sumiki. We don't know too much about her character, but I like how it gives Megumi some depth. I mean, this is the motivation that lets him bond with Yuji and Nobara this episode. It's cute. At the same time, though, the insurrectionist curses steal 3 little guys and make them attack Yuji and Nobara. That's the setup for this arc. Yuji and Nobara fight 2 of the little guys, and Megumi fights the curse afflicting his sister. In that way, I can't fault it too much for being expository. It has a pretty fun detective angle, and always, it's fun to see Yuji and Nobara just hang around. It has everything I could ask for in an exposition episode except interesting villains. But I suppose I'll hold my tongue for a bit. I'll drop it 3/4 down the list under the pilot. Decent. Next. The Curse of Blind Obedience, the second, is a shockingly thorough study into Megumi's character, which, even including the last episode, he was deeply lacking. Due to some plot-related bullcrap, he gets left inside the domain of the thing haunting his sister, which turns out to just be the one from the juvenile detention center, leveled up again, and this time with yet another cursed finger. I'll start with my relatively small critiques of the episode first. Firstly, despite Megumi saying that the curse is more powerful, it never really feels like an escalation. Remember, the last time that they fought one of these things, Yuji's hand got blasted off. Here, the only new thing he does is have a few energy blasts. That's it. Not to mention that he's basically just a random curse with no personality. Like, even the first time around, he was just okay. Why of all villains does he get to come back? And secondly, Sumiki is very much a plot device, which, while excusable in the little Megumi anecdotes, feels laughable in an entire flashback. Now, the reason these are minor is because they don't really affect the larger scale of the episode. For example, the fight with the curse. The point isn't really the curse itself, and is instead the buildup of Megumi's character being upstaged by Yuji and constantly being dog-walked, like the Hanami fight. In that sense, the fact that the villain is so mediocre doesn't really matter, because the fight isn't really meant to just be him versus this random curse. It's about Megumi finally doing something. He does this by having his own incomplete domain. He also sacrifices some of his own Shikigami, and overall, he displays a genuine amount of character growth. And for that, I think that this segment is brilliant. Similarly, even though the flashback just uses Sumiki as a MacGuffin, it's still a good insight into his goals and his lore, especially how he met Gojo. It's just a really sweet moment, and it really allows you to sympathize with him. There's this really excellent moment after he wins and he gets the finger. You feel like he's finally gotten a W, and it's like, oh my god, thank you. Overall, the episode does have some problems. They are easily upset by how just amazing Megami's characterization in it is for the narrative as a whole. Banger. 5th place overall. I feel like Accomplices gets slightly overblown just because it's the season finale. That being said, it's still really good. Fight with Yuji and Nobara against the two things is way better than I was expecting. Yuji and Nobara have surprisingly good fighting chemistry. You know, nowhere near on the Todo Yuji stuff, but still admirable. And one of the two brothers, the things that they're fighting, is a pretty good villain. The reason for that is that this episode really lets us empathize for the villains. There's this shockingly wholesome backstory between the three brothers, and you see how they kind of have a genuine brotherly bond. And when that bond gets manhandled by Yuji and Nobara, it's still sad. It's just an interesting moral middle ground. A lot of the other villains have just felt pure evil, so it's a nice change of pace. So that sympathy is felt a lot more with the Mohawk guy than the green guy. His actions feel a little bit too unreasonable, but that's really semantics. Their techniques aren't half bad either. There are these different forms of blood manipulation which are pretty interesting, but the real star of the show is Nobara. She is just, again, badass in this episode. And after all that happens, Megami, Yuji, and Nobara just reunite. And then we have what is basically a small final montage. It has some pretty good moments in its own right, like Sukuna randomly appearing to eat the finger, third brother becoming vengeful, which is a season 2 topic, and the three of them becoming grade 1 sorcerers. It's a little long in my opinion, but whatever. It's cute. It's still a good top tier episode, but it's a little bit too lopsided to be in my top 5. Under the last. JJK season 1 is extremely solid. Sure, it has 1 or 2 mediocre episodes, but it is a series that really does stand apart. Its characters, tone, atmosphere, everything about it is just so unique. I'm not really shocked it got as big as it was. It just feels so much more raw and vicious. I know we didn't get into it too much, it's more of a season 2 thing, but a lot of characters die. If you thought there was not enough death, do not worry when we get to season 2. But before that, let's get on to ranking. Jujutsu Kaisen, After Rain, For Myself, Group Battle 0, Girl of Steel, Boredom, Small Fry and Reverse Retribution, The Origin of Blind Obedience, Ryomen Sukuna, Group Battle 1, Idol Transfiguration, Curse Womb Must Die 2, Narrow-Minded, Group Battle 2, Sage, Group Battle 3, Assault, Curse Womb Must Die, Accomplices, The Origin of Blind Obedience, 2, Tomorrow, Black Flash, To You Someday, Non-Standard.